Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host, and this week in Reykjavik, it's been good to be back in Iceland with all my consoles and my big screen and my controllers and all of that stuff after that week of holiday that I had. I've come back into gaming like a duck to water, somewhat predictably, I suppose. And so I've had a really, really good week of gaming this week. It seemed like after a quiet period, Game Pass really came back into its own. They dropped Loot River, they dropped Citizen Sleeper, and they dropped Trek To Yomi, and that is the featured game of this episode. And I was very happy to have a special guest on this episode, a guest that I've been wanting to have on for quite a while, Carlos Rodela, one of the co-hosts of So Video Games podcast, a great weekly show that you should check out. I'll put a link in the show notes for that. We've had Brad on before, Brad Galloway, Carlos's co-host. It's a show that I listen to every week, and I was really happy to have Carlos on to talk about what he's been playing, to talk a little bit about Cyberpunk 2077, one of Carlos's favorite games, to talk about JRPGs and the Tales of series, and a lot more as well. And after that initial chat, we get into a detailed review of Trek To Yomi. It's a game that we both loved, and I think both of us had it at like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. But as we were talking about it, we were getting more and more excited about this game that we both just completed. So it was a really fun chat with Carlos, and I think it was really valuable to just go over the things that we liked about this game, things that didn't work so well. And we ended up in a pretty positive place about it, and it was a really pleasurable conversation. So thanks to Carlos for coming on. It is a long episode. We went long, as these episodes tend to, when I've got someone to bounce off and talk with. So I'll keep this intro short. Before we get on to the Carlos section, I will mention that this is a Patreon-supported show. So if you like this podcast, whether it's your first one today or whether you're a long-standing listener who enjoys it every week, you can become a patron of the show for $1 a month at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. For that, you get bonus episodes, and you get an invitation to our Discord community, a really fun place, a really pleasant corner of the internet to come and talk about games. So that's patreon.com/gaminginthewild, if that's something that interests you. And a big thank you to all of my existing patrons and Discord community members. And with that said, let's move on to this week's special guest episode with Carlos Rodela. So I'm very happy this week to be joined by Carlos Rodela. Carlos is a co-host of the So Video Games podcast, a great podcast that I listen to every week. How are you doing, Carlos?
I'm doing great on this Sunday. Ready to talk about video games, and finally, we've been able to pull this off. I think we've been trying to be on the podcast together at the same time, and I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I listen to you and Brad every week. So Video Games is one of my go-tos. I love how much you cover between you. I love how different your opinions are, and I love hearing you both talk so passionately about the games that you love. So it's a great podcast, and thanks for making it, and thanks for making the time to be on.
Oh my goodness, and thanks for listening every week. We're like always blown away when we hear from people who listen. Obviously, we listen to your show as well, and we talk about it on Twitter a lot. But yeah, it's just great because, Brad's super passionate in one direction and I'm super passionate in a different direction sometimes. And it's fun. It's a constant in our lives. I mean, we've been doing it for years now. So,
Right. And I mean, I think the fact that you two like different stuff is actually one of the qualities of the show, really, because you're both bringing so many games, and like you'll both occasionally play a big game, but you usually bring different stuff to the table. So it just makes for a really varied show,
Yeah, and I like when we do talk about the same game as well. Obviously, recently it's been Elden Ring quite a bit. Yeah. But it is, it's really fun. He'll bring a million Switch games or, games I've never even heard of sometimes, and I'll do the same with PC games or a lot of PlayStation games probably. And yeah, I do like that dichotomy. And also, people like the podcast, which is great, but I also like it because I learn about games as well. I think we both kind of learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. You are an all platform gamer, right? So you have a PS5, you have a PC that you play on sometimes, right? And you also play on Xbox. Is that right?
Yeah, and I have a Switch, and I have a Switch Lite. I have pretty much everything you could have. I even have an Ouya.
What's an Ouya? Is that something you need to see a doctor about, or is that?
Oh, it might be. It might be. No. Ouya is one of my favorite systems to talk about. I think I mentioned it on the show a long time ago, but it was one of these kickstarted multi-platform Android-based game systems that were gonna revolutionize short portable indie games, and it failed, and it went away. But I still like it, and it's all the controllers can connect on Bluetooth to it, and so, anyways. I have a lot of different weird platforms.
Right. Were you tempted to get a Playdate? And my social media has been lighting up with people getting their Playdate consoles, their tiny handheld console that has this weird crank on it.
Yeah.
And it looks like a Game Boy Advance, pretty much, like a Game Boy Advance SP. The clamshell one, but with a crank on it. And I mean, I saw it when it was up for pre-order, but I thought I already have a little Game Boy with a black and white screen, and I not a black and white screen, but an old screen, small screen, and it kind of hurts my eyes to even use that now. So I'm not sure that I want a modern retro handheld in that style, if you know what I mean. But it does look like people have been having fun with them, and it looks like it's going to be serving indie games to people that have one constantly, specially made ones. So it's an intriguing little thing. But I don't know, were you tempted?
Yeah, I was, and I have a friend who actually worked with it and helping produce some of the games, or publishing them. And so I was very intrigued, and I don't have that yet, but I like anything that will change it up. That's one of my big core mechanics of how I podcast. Really, is I want to find new things and new delivery methods for games and systems and stuff. So I'll probably pick one up at some point, but it just seems like any console is based on the software. So I was looking at some of the games, and it just didn't seem like a lot of the games caught my attention right now. So I'm going to wait for developers to kind of get more into it. Yeah. And then maybe I can pick it up later.
And I think, from listening to So Video Games for so long, every now and then you and Brad will just mention what's going on in your lives and, excuse me, and just talk about what's going on. And so, if you listen to someone every week, you do end up picking up a lot of little bits and pieces about them over time. And I think I remember that you perhaps have worked in games and games media before. Is that right?
Yeah. I started with essentially early making of videos, early YouTube days, early gaming press. So I was part of GameSpot. I worked at this little company called Mevio. We made short, funny videos. And also I had a gaming show then, which was called Press Pause. And anybody in the audience listening know about Press Pause, hit me up. That'd be awesome. A blast from the past. And yeah, I worked with Sony and bigger companies as well, doing a lot of I'm here at E3, Carlos, on the spot, I did that for a long time. And then at some point after the gaming press kind of changed, especially because of YouTube and so many new content creators, the bigger companies, let a lot of people go. And me and a lot of my friends went to different game publishers and developers. And so that's kind of where I sit right now. I'm working with a game developer publisher and doing a lot of social media and videos and stuff for them.
Right. I guess the rise of independent content creators, which is kind of, I guess, how we know each other from each other's podcasts. It's actually where I think all of my favorite games coverage comes from. I do listen to a little bit from IGN and a little bit from, the big ones, that PlayStation podcast. What's it called again? It's gone out of my head.
Oh, yeah, the Beyond.
Yeah, I listened to Beyond a little bit, and I listened to the Xbox one by Vice a little bit. But I think most of my favorite shows are actually just made by people like you and I, or people that have been in and around games and have ended up doing their own thing. And I just think that there's something about the sort of lower stakes and more relaxed and more open, less political, less like, not so much thinking about how the online backlash is going to be if you say something, which I think Beyond sometimes suffers from. I think there's something nice about independent media made by people that just really love games,
That's interesting you say that, because it feels like, now that I'm thinking about it, I've kind of come full circle, because in the early days of, I was part of some of the, this is a humble brag, I guess, but I was part of some of the very first streaming, like on the internet. We were doing a video show on this company called Ustream. And it was, like Justin TV and Ustream and these old companies where we would get the front page, like we were just an independent gaming show or independent, web show, but we'd be on the homepage just because there was less people doing what we were doing. Multi-camera shot, like live streaming, crazy. And this is 2009. So, but again, I think a lot of people liked it because it wasn't a big company. We worked for a company, but we were still just ourselves, and we had our own kind of voice and stuff. And then, it got huge, EGMs of the world and stuff, and IGNs. And then it became, like you said, kind of like, well, what do we really want to give this game this score because of reasons, and other industry factors? So, and then, it rose and turned again in on itself, and like the smaller independent creators took over.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we are now. And I mean, I listen every week to a few podcasts like The Short Game and Time Played 3HR, and I listen to them every week, and I love having their voices and their thoughts on games, just as a big part of my intake of where I find games and just hear opinions about them. And so video games is a big part of that for me. Like I love my little set of really good, relaxed, pleasant games podcasts, so it's really great to have you on finally after all this time.
And I'm really excited that you put us in that little category. That's awesome. And I have the same thing. I have like 4 or 5 that I really like. And one I'll mention right now at the top of the show, and we're going to talk about later. I'll bring him up again. But have you watched Skill Up on YouTube?
I love Skill Up. Yeah, I watch his news show every week. And I think his reviews are some of the most incisive reviews out there. Like he's a very sharp critic. And if you are planning to review a game and you watch someone else's reviews or you take in other people's content before you do your review, sometimes it can be that their opinions have kind of burrowed into your head a little bit and you end up regurgitating them by accident. Skill Up is so smart that I've started not watching Skill Up reviews if I'm going to talk about a game, because his thoughts will just like overwrite my thoughts.
I totally get that, because I've actually, what happens when I notice that happening on the podcast, you might have heard me do this, I'll just say his name.
Yeah.
I'll be like, I invoke Skill Up now.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm thinking about something I just watched. Yeah. I think with a review, that would be really smart. But I did actually check out his Yomi review. And so that's
right, you gave it a recommend, didn't he? I saw the thumbnail.
Yeah. And one thing that he talked about when we get into the Yomi review, I'll regurgitate. But yeah, awesome.
And actually, Alana, I'm sure you know Alana Pierce, of course, just super prominent YouTuber who does Play, Watch, Listen podcast, and she does her own diary videos, and she works for Sony now, but she does this occasional show that will pop up. You've probably seen it in your YouTube feed, but it has on it Skill Up and two of the prominent streamer critic guys. Who I don't know the other two, but Skill Up is on there as well. And it's such a nice little show, actually, with the 4 of them.
Yeah, I've seen it once. Yeah, I've seen it once. And now that you're saying that, I remember him being on there and be like, hey, there's the guy. I have to see if they do them very often. I'm not sure if they do.
Yeah, it doesn't even have a name, that show. They just pop one out every month or two. But it's really nice. I've forgotten the other 2 guys' names. I've not had my full caffeine intake today, but it's a good little show anyway. I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, do that. And I'm going to go back and watch the other one I haven't seen probably.
But enough Skill Up. We are going to be reviewing a new indie game today called Trek To Yomi. I think anyone that's got their eyes on games media has probably heard about this one a little bit. It's a day one Game Pass game, so it'll be popping up in everyone's feed on Xbox, but it's also out on everything else too. But before we do get to Trek To Yomi, I was wondering, because I originally wanted to have you on because I played Cyberpunk 2077 version 1.5 this year. And I am one of those people that had an eye on Cyberpunk was initially interested, saw what happened upon release with dismay. We all wanted a really good game coming out. The release problems that it had and all of that stuff. But eventually, when it came out on the next gen consoles, I thought, okay, now's the time. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do this. So I went in on Cyberpunk. I've played through and rolled credits. I think I have 70 hours in the game. I've only had one ending so far. I guess the vanilla ending. But just today, I was playing a little bit more of it and advancing Panam's storyline. And taking out some side quests, doing some stuff with Kerry, Johnny Silverhand's former bandmate. And you have perhaps been the most vocal and passionate champion of Cyberpunk 2077 that I've encountered online. So I thought it might be fun to talk about that game a little bit with you and just check out what you've been playing more generally as well before we get into the review. So, I guess you've rinsed Cyberpunk for all that it's possible to do now, right?
Yes, I have. And you don't have to twist my arm to talk about it. If you've listened to my podcast at all, I have mentioned it probably every episode.
Patch notes with Carlos.
Very, very, passionate about Cyberpunk. So I love it. I was very lucky to get a PS5 early on. It was like one of those affiliate links. I just clicked it at the right time. I mean, like when it came out, PlayStation 5, I had it, which is nuts. Mm-hmm. So I know I'm very lucky there. But because I did have it, Cyberpunk was always the first game I wanted for it. And even though it was the PS4 version and it was like full of bugs, the PS5 did play it better. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember a lot of people talking about that. But initially it just like blue screen crash, like bad. But then after the first week or so, I mean, we're talking about, people waiting years or whatever, a year or something to play this game. But I mean, it took a few weeks for them to get the hard crashes out. And in general, I played and beat that game in the first couple months of its release. So for me, it was a different experience than a lot of other people. I saw the torn edges and the Skyrim-y glitches and all that stuff. But because, as you've played it now, I did the Pan Am, romance section, and she is my girlfriend, by the way. If anybody thinks that they're
your beloved
connected to her, they're not really.
Pan Am.
Yes, I have a T-shirt that says "Pan Am is my girlfriend" because I'm that nerdy.
I went the other way. I played as a female V, and Pan Am was not interested in me. She's a very heterosexual lady, so I ended up with Judy Alvarez, who is my beloved, and is also a fantastic character in the game.
She is a fantastic character. I've done a lot of side missions with her as well, but. Yeah, so I really just enjoyed the whole story part and was not caught up in all the my gun doesn't shoot the right way or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I really enjoyed it. And I liked my ending, which I won't spoil here, but is an ending I liked. I didn't like the fact, which I've said many times on the show, is that whenever you beat certain games, they go, okay, if you want to play more, you have to revert your game. And you have to stop the ending, or reverse the ending, and then go back before you even did any of that stuff. I hate that.
Me too. It's like, I remember a big game that was a favorite of mine was Breath of the Wild. That's a common sentiment among gamers. But, you beat Ganon at the end of the game, and then it just takes you back to just before. Mm-hmm. And after playing for 200 hours or something, I literally waited until, the final hour and thought, okay, it's finally time to do this. I was ready to close out the game, And so I went and took down Ganon. It was a pretty anticlimactic final battle. But afterwards, you go and talk to these people that you've been dealing with for hundreds of hours, like literal days of your actual life. Like you go and see Midna, and you go and see all of the kind of the characters you met along the way. And they've all just got this collective amnesia that you did what you've been trying to do for the whole game. And I really wished for just a little bit of post-game content, even if it was just a couple of lines for each character, just for you to get closure. I don't think games should necessarily end at the obvious point. There are some games that let you play on, and I really enjoy that. It's something that I enjoyed about Chicory, for example. Like after you've done the main quest of Chicory, you can keep walking around in that world. You can finish all your open side quests, and you get a couple of new lines of dialogue from people reflecting upon what happened in the game. And I thought that postscript section is so lovely, and it's so enjoyable to just come down from that giant climax of the final ending and to just still be able to spend time in that world. I wish that more games would do that, and I wish that would become the standard.
Yeah, I remember it happened just recently which is great because this is actually timely. Dying Light 2, which I
Hmm.
really enjoyed, played all of it, beat it, and afterwards it was like, okay, the world's going to be a little different now, like
Hmm.
graphically, minor spoilers. And that graphics and the weird world part change is going to stay, but you can keep going, and everybody knows what you did. Like
Yeah.
they know that you, in quotes, saved the world or whatever. And
Hmm.
I loved it. And now they just released their last DLC. So I'm on the fence if I go back to it, because if I do, I'll probably be in there for a while.
Hmm.
And it is tons of new stuff, a whole new campaign thing. And yeah, all of that will take place like post the game,
Yeah.
and I think that's great. Like, what was the other game that just did it? I can't remember. There's a couple that have done it, and I do like when that happens. I know that for a fact with Cyberpunk, minor spoiler, something that I picked in my ending means I left.
Right.
I'm not going to be at the city anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that was their choice. I mean, they could have done that same kind of ending and then been like, we're going to stick around the city for a little while.
Yeah, like Death Stranding. Death Stranding was like this as well.
Right, right, right.
I mean, I guess the way that they did it was because the ending changes the entire state of the world so much that they would have had to remake the world, But
Yeah.
the way that they did it was very clever. And it said, like, in the 2 weeks before the final battle, it just has a time skip. And so it sends you back then. And so you have this like 2 week stretch just to run around. Everyone knows who you are. Your progress is saved. It's like New Game Plus, and it is before the finale, but it's not, it still has all the progress. So it's not like New Game Plus or anything. That was quite a clever way to do it.
Yeah. And also Elden Ring recently, you can beat that game and keep playing, and the world is different
Hmm.
and it stays different. So,
Yeah, this should become the standard, shouldn't it? This is it's especially if it's a game that is open ended and allows you to play on. It's just so underwhelming to just have everyone to have finished the game and done the big objective and just to not be able to talk to anyone about it
I
after
know.
spending tens or 20 or hundreds of hours on something. You really want those conversations. So
Especially when they release DLC afterwards,
yeah,
because they're like,
yeah.
oh, well, you could play DLC, which takes place before you beat the game. And I'm like, well, it didn't really, that's not how the order of events happened,
Right.
And also, Far Cry. So one of my favorite games of, I don't know, a while, Far Cry 6.
It was your game of the year last year, wasn't it?
I think it might be.
So video games. I was very surprised that it beat out Guardians of the Galaxy, which I thought was a shoe-in for your
Guardians
game.
Yeah, that's a close one. Now you're reminding me of it, and maybe I'll switch it in my mind. But Guardians is amazing. But yeah, no, I think why I loved it so much is that immersive thing, especially during like the COVID, times we've had. It's first person, which gives you that full more immersion. PS5 version looked beautiful, and I just really liked being in that world. And having beat the game, I could keep going back to it, and everybody, knew that I was pretty badass for doing what I did. And it felt like I could just talk to random NPCs, and they would say a little tidbit that, like, they're happy that we won or something. And then I met what's his name, Danny Trejo,
Right.
and he was just showed up, and he was cooking tacos, and I was like,
Yeah.
this is a world I want to be in.
Right.
I think that's why, not to over iterate this, but people who listen to the show, I say this all the time. I just really go to games for escapism, but I also want to have more and more believable worlds. And that's what I'm really excited about. Having grown up with, Pong and Atari and Nintendo, like that's my natural progression in my brain now. I'm like, I want more because I've had like the basics for so long. And I think that's another reason why I like, that world where I can go back to and I can keep doing stuff in it.
Yeah, same here. I think I'm still waiting for the game that allows you to play on after the finale, and that the developer has the will to keep lending support to. I guess it's a difficult one because obviously they have to make money, and I guess if you're paying upfront for a single player game, you're paying your £60 or £70, and then that's all the money they're ever going to get from you, unless like you chip in a little bit for a DLC later. But most DLC obviously seems to be free now. It's like these little bolt-ons at the end just to kind of keep the player base engaged. But I'm still waiting for like a first-person game of the Breath of the Wild Cyberpunk type that just where the world just keeps going. You know what I mean? But I
Mm-hmm.
guess for that to work, there would have to be some types of monetization, and then you end up in like icky, sticky Ubisoft's territory where they're trying to wring money out of players. But it would be my dream too. Like I hear what you're saying about immersive worlds, and I really agree. And sometimes you just want the game to just go forever. I feel that way about Breath of the Wild. I don't know if there were new characters that appeared all over, and new actual gameplay rather than like tacked on. Okay, now you get these extra clothes. Now you can do this extra mode.
Right.
Just more game. Like in an ongoing way.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of GTA Online, if you
Right.
think of it.
Yeah,
It's basically like creating a games as a service, and you can do that if you have new monetization models to keep giving and feeding the developer runway essentially.
Yeah, maybe even if it was just a subscription to the game. I guess all of this has been tried out and gamed out, but I don't know. I'm still waiting for
life.
Yeah, right. It's just not wanting games to end, I guess, means that they were good games at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you said earlier is like when you spend so much time, it's like befriending people or NPCs and characters you really care about, and you just want to do more of it. So.
Yeah, and for them to be believable, just to get a few more lines from them. Just to go back to Cyberpunk a little bit, one thing that disappointed me slightly about the game is that, as you've said, there are romance options in there. You can progress relationships in there. Judy became my girlfriend in the game and still is. But if you pop around and see your girlfriend in Cyberpunk to say hi and check in, Judy just has a couple lines and they are the same. She's always standing by the window.
Yeah.
And she's always like, hey, what's up with you? And then all of the conversation options are grayed out. And I can see that they've tried to keep it going because, I mean, just today, after playing Cyberpunk a little bit, I got this text from Judy saying, my gran wants to talk to you because I told her about you. And so I got a text from her grandma, and like I had this short text conversation with Judy's grandma. So the texts work. Like you will get occasional texts from Judy, and she'll be like, I'm going out, and then she'll send you crazy stuff, and then the next morning she's like, ugh, I have a hangover, I'm so sorry. So they tried to keep it going.
Yeah, I saw that.
But as for actually seeing them in person, it's just the end of that. As soon as you start dating the person in Cyberpunk, that's kind of the end of it, apart from text.
I know, it's funny because you mentioned that before they did that little extra DLC. We can't even call it DLC, but the kind of, a little bit of connection with your person that you romanced afterwards.
Oh, was that added on? I didn't realize.
It was actually, yeah. Yeah, that was added on. And because I tell you why, because as soon as I finished the game, I did revert it because I wanted to play more of it. So, and then I went to go find Pan Am. I was like, you're my girlfriend now. We should go on missions together.
Right.
This is what we do now. And then I couldn't find her. Like she was like, for a while before they patched it, like she was just gone. So it's like I couldn't even get to her. I went to the Nomad area, and I couldn't find her.
Searching the world for Pan Am. What a sad quest at the end of the Cyberpunk.
It really was. It was a new DLC. It was Carlos is Alone. That's the DLC. Carlos is Lonely. And it was free. It was a free DLC. But then, I noticed that they added some extra bits. And so the one bit that for Pan Am is you can like go to the camp, find her finally, talk to her some new dialogue options, and you can go to bed with her. And it's literally just go to bed with her. Like you go into the room and you sleep, and then you wake up and she's there and you leave. And
it's the same with Judy. They've added the option to sleep over.
It's a fun sleepover. We already like, I don't know, this podcast is PG, but we've already like been close. And now in this other DLC, we're just going to like be sleepover buddies. Put our pajamas on.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So other than Cyberpunk, what else have you been playing, Carlos?
As you know, I play a lot of things, but right now I'm full on in. I just said this on the podcast, which goes up tomorrow or today, I forget. I finished Elden Ring. Obviously, I went and played a bazillion hours afterwards, and very tired of that style of game now. So I jumped over to old school JRPGs, which I love. So I'm playing Tales of Zestiria, which is one of the Tales games. Tales of Arise, one of my favorite games of all time, really. I think that was on my top 10 list last year, too. So every game, similar to Final Fantasy, is its own little world, and so you don't have to have them. They're not really usually connected. But Tales of Zestiria is actually connected to Tales of Berseria.
Hmm.
And I bought that one and didn't beat it. So I kind of went back and started Zestiria. I'm going to beat that one. And those two are actually one of the only ones I think connected in the series.
Hmm.
The rest of them are just kind of standalone games. But the reason I bring it up and why I'm playing them is just similar to Tales of Arise. And I heard Tales of Zestiria, a lot of Ias in this series.
Right, it's a bit confusing as an outsider. Like I've been very aware of all these tales of, Tales of Westeria and Tales of Berserkia and all of this stuff, and it's really intimidating. And I don't know where to start with them. So it's nice to hear a little bit about those games.
Yeah, well, here's the main takeaway I want to tell people and you as well. There are many, like I think 15 baseline games or something crazy. A lot of them are more old school, so I think maybe a handful are from the newer kind of console generation. But Zestiria is supposed to be really good as well. But I think what Arise did very well, and Zestiria is already doing, and why I'm still going to keep playing it till I beat it, is it's a fantasy setting. You have many characters. It's similar to Final Fantasy where you have NPCs who are just doing, you set them up to do aggressive or defensive or whatever. And it's action time. So action, real-time combat. And it's a little bit of mixture of like, you can add a little bit of auto or semi-auto attacking. So if you want, because there's a million battles in RPGs, you can kind of set stuff up so that just, even when you're pressing the button, it's just kind of choosing things it should do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I think Final Fantasy 13 did that. But that's not why I love it. So that's the style of game. But why I love it is every time you go into these worlds, fantasy worlds, most of the time they're talking about humanity and what's wrong with it. An example is in this one, and this is really cool. Like there's malevolence in the world, which, by the way, spoiler, is also in our world. And because of this malevolence, people, get dark and they kind of like just become, filled with hatred or anger and stuff. And so you go to a town and your character can see the difference between like a regular person or like, a monster or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see this little kid and he's like yelling at this old man. He's like, "You get out of here, old man. I don't need to listen to you." And he runs away and he's being awful. And you go up to him and challenge him. And he's like, "What's going on, kid?" And your character sees that it's a monster.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't like strike him down. He's a kid,
So are they possessed by malevolence, the spirit of malevolence? Is that what's going on?
It's really more like they have kind of succumbed to it.
Right.
And so that is a monster. It's just the facade and the regular people can't see it's, a monster. Mm-hmm. And you can see through it. So you'll see someone else arguing about something. You're like, whoa. So you have to go there and actually like, yes, fight some monsters, but you also have to like manage the situation because you can't just like kill people in the street. So, and then Tales of Arise did that same thing where it like talked about culture and racism and, oh no, these people are this way. Don't you know that? And poor people are this way, and class systems. So I think it's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to those RPGs.
Right. Nice. Yeah. The last one that I played of a JRPG type game, I played Fantasian on Apple Arcade, and then I dipped into Ni no Kuni on the Switch, which I guess is like a very cuddly, low-level JRPG with those beautiful Studio Ghibli visuals, but it still has party management, it still has leveling, it still has the overworld and the incidental combat. And as a kid, I played I played and finished Secret of Mana, and so I guess I was in those early JRPGs that came west. But there's always been problems with that genre for me, and I think especially going back to them now, they take a really long time. And the level gating tends to be a little bit intense, and the combat tends to be pretty repetitive. Just that's my take on the genre as a whole, like that structure of game that's of JRPGs, And so even though like there are some that I would really love to play, like Tales of Arise looks awesome, I'm kind of wondering if I buy it, if I'm going to get 20 hours in and then just get fatigue of doing the combat again and again. So it's interesting that they've got that almost autoplay. It's like they've recognized that it can be a little monotonous and tried to fix it in the game structure. Yeah,
and that's a good point because the short answer is you should play Tales of Arise because I think what they do is they do more moment to moment like story beats that, even if you're like you have to grind somewhere. Before or after that, you'll get like a huge story beat, and you'll really kind of be interested in what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I was always interested. It was like always the next big, story plot line was coming around the corner.
Yeah.
And also, it looks like a painting. It's like the most amazing thing when you actually run it on your system.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would suggest that. But I think that you're right. Like they did early on, even with the version I'm playing, Zisteria, they kind of said, "Hey, here's a kind of more auto version for the combat because there's just a lot to do, and you probably want to get to another story part."
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I highly recommend the Tales series, and I'm not prepared now, but I could make a list of RPGs I think that do that well, which is like story beats enough and not just grinding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fantasian had an interesting way. I think a lot of people skipped this one because it was Apple Arcade exclusive, but it's a full-on JRPG that just runs on iOS. And they had an interesting way of doing it, which is that as you are running through the overworld, every time you get a combat encounter, at first you have to fight them, but then as the game progresses, you can bank them. So you have this device, and it's like a marble rolls into your device every time you're supposed to do combat, and then you can mount it up to like 10. So you're running through the world and you're skipping combat and you're progressing. And then when it maxes out, you have to do all of the combat. So you can kind of bank all of the bouts of combat and then have this massive battle blowout, which is like, it's a fix for the JRPG problem of constant breaks in play for turn-based combat. It was an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And I hope that Fantasian comes to some other stuff. I don't know if it's come out on anything else yet, but I hope it does. It's a good game.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, if it's just still iOS or not. So I'll Google it and see.
Okay, well, the featured game of this episode is going to be Trek To Yomi. So let's talk about it. So Trek To Yomi is a 2022 game. It is developed by Leonard Menchari. It is published by Devolver. It is an Xbox Game Pass Day 1 game. It's also on PC and it's on PlayStation. Metacritic has it at, and this slightly surprised me, between 69 and 75 from critics, and a user score around the 7 mark. How Long to Beat has it at 5 hours for the story, 7.5 hours for completionists. And the developers describe it as a vow to his dying master, the young swordsman Hiroki is sworn to protect his town and the people he loves against all threats. Faced with tragedy and bound to duty, the lone samurai must voyage beyond life and death to confront himself and decide his path forward. And my mini bite-sized takeaway of this one is, it's a short, lovingly crafted homage to black and white samurai films, complete with high drama, tense swordplay, and a story about love, duty, and revenge. So you've finished this one. You've just finished it today, right? So what's your story with this one? Was this a game that you were looking forward to, and how was your time with it?
Yeah, I was always looking forward to it once I saw the trailer at one of those shows, online shows, summer preview or whatever it was. And I reached out to the developer. I think they sent me an early code, so I was actually not able to talk about it for a while. Mm-hmm. So I did a preview on our podcast where I said very little. And then just last night, we recorded a new episode, so I talked about it. But yes, I was always excited about it. I really enjoyed the preview, and then I think this game is great. I think this is a very short experience, which Brad and I talk about on the show all the time. We want more of. I love a 5-6 hour game, and in this busy life, and also in our particular line of work, it's nice to have something that you can get through quickly. But I think it just fits what they were trying to tell as well. The story never weighs its welcome. It's just or outstays its welcome. It just kind of does what it does. It tells you the plot points. It moves you along without any spoilers. It's just this great, bite-sized experience that is also visually arresting. The grayscale, built for grayscale, so it's perfect. The graphics just fit, and it's hard to do that in video games sometimes. Mm-hmm. And then I think that, the combat seems basic. It feels like Shadow Complex, which is one of my favorite games, actually.
Haven't played that one.
Oh, you should look it up if you like this game. It's a side-scrolly, camera changes perspective kind of game like this. And it feels a little bit like Elden Ring at times, because it's kind of like you get to mid-bosses and you can die by anybody. Like any kind of enemy you find could kill you if you're not smart. But I enjoy the combat. It's nothing like, amazing, but it does kind of progress with some combos along the way. I just really like the experience. I can't speak highly enough of it. I don't know how that Metacritic score is real.
Me too. I was shocked by that, actually, because to me this is like hovering between an 8 and a 9. It's just a really top-notch, super high-quality, bite-sized experience, and I haven't dug into the reviews, so I don't know what their critiques of it are. But there's a lot to like about this, as you said. I mean, I love the way that it handles the 2D, 2.5D mixture. So something that I think that really stands out about this game is that the perspective changes constantly in a way that is like film shots. And a lot of games have tried this, and I think no game has done it as well as this. It reminds me a little bit of a game like Brothers, where the camera changes angle all the time. But in this game, it's like 1 minute you're running into the screen in that third-person way with this black and white scenery flowing past you. You'll go around a corner and then it will cut, and it will be almost top-down, like an isometric game, and then you'll cross a bridge and it will cut again, and you'll be looking horizontally at the bridge. And it's always at those horizontal moments the game seems to flip from this exploratory, moving through the world 2.5D to pretty much straight up like 2D combat. You can kind of tell when the combat is coming, right? Because it flips to 2D, and then it's like a face-off on the bridge, and that's when the combat begins. I love the way that it handles camera work, and that kind of the cinematography in this game is really excellent.
Yeah, to that point, I was going to say is that like those camera angles are masterful switches. I call it masterful because you could be going the different direction when you come out of the camera switch, and you it's intuitive. Like I never am like, oh, where am I supposed to go? Like it always feels intuitive. But we haven't mentioned it, but there's like definitely kind of side paths you can go down. Yeah. And there's not a ton, but a lot of them are really important because they will increase your stamina, increase your health, and also maybe be a little story bit and stuff. And so I just loved it. I felt like everything was exciting to walk around in. And those camera angles are so cool with the depth of field stuff they do as well. Like stuff in the foreground and the background. And sometimes you're even like a really small character because you're so far away, and you would think that wouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah,
like,
it's crazy, isn't it?
Don't know how. Yeah, I did combat as like a teeny little ant, in the distance on a bridge, and it felt great. Yeah. So I think it is a masterful presentation, and to invoke the words of Skill Up, because I think this is very eloquent what he said. He said it's like each little scene is seen through a Viewmaster.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like, that really makes a lot of sense. It's like these little vignettes, and you're just kind of, or dioramas or something. But and to your point, the combat's still fun, no matter what perspective you're looking at.
Yeah. I think I've played games that have tried to do this and done it badly a bunch of times. And Fantasian that we just mentioned is guilty of this. It's like if you're running down through the screen, you come out of the bottom of the screen, the scene changes, and then suddenly you are running up. And sometimes in Fantasian, you can be pushing the way that you were going, and then immediately exit the screen again and go back to the old screen because it's switched direction, but you haven't had time to switch controls, or your mind hasn't been able to instantly pick up on that change. And there's a whole bunch of games that are like this. What was that game that came out last year? It was called Last Stop. Did you play that one? It was like an Annapurna game.
Oh, I've seen it, but I didn't play it, weirdly enough.
Right, and it's not good. And I think one of the reasons that I bounced on it was literally this. It's trying to be like a cinema piece. It cuts and cuts and cuts. It's by the people that made Virginia, which I thought was quite a successful.
Oh, I did like Virginia, yeah.
So it was by the people that made that, and that was very cinematic. It was cut like Silence of the Lambs. It had these jump cuts. Even when you're walking down a hallway, it would just cut to your office, cut to the stairs. And you're moving, but it feels like you're cutting through a film whilst moving very comfortably. And then so I was very keen to play Last Stop, but it has that problem that we talked about. You're running right, the shot changes, and suddenly your character's running left, and you've gone back into the old screen, and it's just like a mess. And this game manages to change shot hundreds of times throughout the game. And I never once felt disorientated on the screen. I always knew where I was, and my eye went to where my character was. And so it really does feel like you're running through a film in a way that I've not quite experienced before. And I think that the way it handles story is also great for this, because it will give you a cutscene and then you'll run for a while. There'll be these exploration moments when you're running through environmental storytelling, like you're running through a village, people shout to you, you're running through the fields, you know where you're going to, hunt someone down or something like that. Along the way, there are bouts of combat, and it's Japanese samurai style combat, so it's like a couple hits, they die or you die. So it's very tense, bout-based combat. And then you'll get to your next cutscene, and because it's cutting all the way as you're going through combat and exploration, and the cutscenes are so well paced, and the combat encounters are so well paced, like there's a few of them between story point and story point, it really was like it delivered like a kind of a complete video game cinema experience in a way that I think I've not found before.
Yeah, and to that point of the story, I just mentioned this on the show too. Like, it starts off when you're a kid, which many games do, and of course, like disasters happening, and then you're very quickly an adult. And I liked that transition a lot. And it didn't need a bunch of cutscenes. Like to you said, like your point, it's like it does some cutscenes to move the story along, and then you're going, and now we're trying some stuff out, and we're fighting and stuff. So I love, again, it never overstayed its welcome. It always just kind of gave me enough oomph from the story or the quick, tidbits to want to keep going. And also, I think, yeah, like I was telling Brad this in the show, a lot of people, when they see the trailer, they don't know that there's those exploration moments where you're not fighting.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part of why this game works, I think, because when you're doing that, like Souls or I guess any RPG, you're saving. So you find a save spot, you heal, you talk to people, and, have a million different camera switches. So you can get a lot of like different scenes that go through, and then you jump back into combat. But having those kind of little mini breathers, I think is really good, because if not, then this could have just been like a button fest.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Honestly, I think that the pacing in this game is superb in a way that's kind of hard to articulate, because so many things come together to make it that way. And I was saying that, like, if you start from a cutscene and you're told you're going on a mission, and then you run through a village, and as you've said, you can go into if you see optional doorways, sometimes they're closed and your eye has to rest on them to realize that your character can kick them open, and you might find inside an item that has like a description that you can read that tells you a little bit about the culture of the time, or even a story or a character. It will top up your health or top up your stamina. And so, yeah, there are these kind of small exploration moments. It's a very linear game, but it does give you enough of a feeling that there is something to see rather than just running through a screen from A to B. So it definitely massages that linear format a little bit, just to give you a small sense of freedom and of being engaged in that world.
Yeah, and it also adds a little bit of element of different items and weapons. I don't think it does it great, and I don't think it's really supposed to, but there is a bow and arrow. There is a weird gun that takes way too long to shoot. I didn't like that gun at all. And there's a few things that you can pick up along the way that kind of help. But in general, I think the bow and arrow is the only thing I ever really used here and there. But you're probably best suited to just go in with the katana or whatever it is.
So a big part of the game is, it is a very coherent overall experience for sure. I think that the story is really well done, and we're not going to spoil it if we do decide to talk about the big turn that the story takes, and we'll do it after a spoiler break. But so, yeah, you get cutscenes, you're running through village, you're opening doors, you're finding stuff, and then there are the bouts of combat. You know when they're coming because it will flip to a side view. It's almost always in a side view. And the combat itself is, those one-hit games. I think I've played a couple of them. Like there's a couple of games that it's a one-hit kill kind of game. And samurai movies are very much like that, right? They stare at each other, they look at each other, they size each other up. There's a flash of a sword and a clash of swords, and then someone will just slowly drop to the ground and they're done.
Yep.
You know, that kind of samurai movie combat. I think it tries to take the spirit of that and to put it into these short bouts of combat. And as we've said, the pacing is great. So there's like a save point before pretty much every bout, or at least each set of bouts. I think later in the game you'll have 3 bouts in a row before you get to the next save point. So it starts to ramp up the challenge that way. You have to think about your health a little more. Never a lot. There's no healing in this game. It's just you just heal at save points. But the save points allow you to never have to go back and repeat much. I think I only had to go back and repeat things pretty much twice. And that's something that I really enjoy too. I think that many games that try to lean into cinema make the mistake of having a very propulsive scene with a lot of momentum that you can die in, and then you cut back to the start of the entire sequence and you have to do it again. And so the effect of the scene is just completely dissipated. I think the worst example I can think of in that is Ori and the Blind Forest.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, when you do like the watermill getaway, you get up to the top of the watermill, it starts to flood, and then there's this incredible sequence where you're running from a monster that is trying to kill you, and you have to carry out this intense sequence of jumping and grappling, avoiding obstacles, like sailing down away from the watermill to survive the flood. But you have to do that a lot of times. Like it takes a lot of learning what's coming up. It takes a lot of reactions. And so by the 5th time, the drama is just dead and you're just kind of annoyed and you just want it to be over. And this game never does that to you. The combat is so short and sharp and it's so well measured. The pacing is so good that it just lets you live through the cinematic experience in such a cool way, right?
Yeah, and to that point, like I think, like you said, I might have done it twice in this game, where you're like, okay, I do have to go back through that one thing, but twice in a whole game is pretty good. And I think that that's not just these types of games; that's like every game. There's so many games that do a cutscene. That could be a third person, a first person RPG, whatever. And yeah, you do this huge momentum thing, and you're like, whoa, 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 and then like the next second you die, and then you have to just rewatch it or skip the cutscene, of course.
Yeah,
but yeah, it doesn't do that in this game. And also talking about the kind of action and the way this game plays, it's mostly that kind of, sword play. But near the end, I found a few different sections that were similar to Dragon's Lair, old school reference.
right.
Where literally you're just like running and you have to make sure you make the right path. And if you don't make the right path, you're dead.
Yeah, little bits of variety, like collapsing bridge, and like you have to take down the enemies before the ground collapses behind you. So it's a little push towards fighting quickly.
Right. And then there's literally a point, it's a minor spoiler. There's like everything's catching on fire. And if you don't run this certain path, then you're dead,
Yeah.
But I love, again, they kept adding those, peppering them in, and all of them fit. Like nothing that added to this, including boss battles. I mean, I struggled a little bit, but then I figured it out, and it just never like was a stopping point. It was like, no, that makes sense that boss is harder, and this whatever. And the final boss, by the way, which again, no spoilers, there's obviously bosses in games. I think a few times, like maybe 3 times it took me. And that's like amazing, in my mind, that like it wasn't trying to say, this is what the game is about, the difficulty part of it. It was like, oh, this is the story. And at some point you're going to be stronger. And, here's the end of the story. So,
yeah, it's sometimes a little counterintuitive, isn't it? Like if you are playing Aloy, for example, in Horizon, and you are this alpha huntress who is just taking down, everything that can possibly be taken down. She's like a power player at this point with her explosives and with her slow motion abilities and stuff. And then you come up against like a giant tyrannosaur that just stomps you 10 times. And you're like, that's kind of a little out of touch with my idea of who I'm playing at this moment. You know what I mean?
Right.
And this game doesn't do that to you. It's like you're playing a samurai. You're playing a powerful, skilled samurai. And so your powerful, skilled samurai can best these battles, and the game lets you do it. And that feels good.
That's a good point. And I lament that you brought up Horizon, because on my last podcast, we talked about how I'm not going back to it for a while because I am really exhausted of all the menus and
Mhm.
key points that I have to go unlock. It's a pretty immersive game that I like a lot, but there is a lot to overwhelm you. But
Mhm.
I do remember feeling that same thing where I've unlocked skill tree parts. I think I'm a really awesome huntress, like you said, and then I instant die from something.
Mhm.
It doesn't fit together, but yeah, in this game, it just fits. So
Yeah, and it might take a couple tries, but you always feel like you are inhabiting this character, and that something that I actually really like about the combat in this game. Let's have a little segment about the combat, just the combat, because it is interesting. It looks a little bit like something like Katana Zero, where it's like a
mhm.
side-scrolling little section, and you have to some degree, you have to execute it perfectly. Especially when there are mobs coming at you, you'll learn the rhythm of where they're coming from. There are occasional battles where it starts off pretty simple. There's just a couple guys in front of you. You take them out. You have a single sword combo that hits 3 times in a light attack that's fast, or twice in a heavy attack. And as you progress, the enemies get more difficult. They get more weapons. They will get ranged abilities. They will come at you in mobs, so you have to manage them. But as you're progressing, you'll get new combos, like new multi-button combos. For example, if you push backwards, and then the one that I used the most probably was the turn and strike. So you just
Mm.
turn and then unleash like a very rapid triple light attack, and then you can just turn again and do it again. And this got me out of a lot of bad situations. But again, like there's the ranged enemies that will be loading up their weapon to try and take you, and then you'll get like a roll that will allow you to roll through a projectile and then strike. There is a running attack that will let you close distance, and so as the game changes up the types of combat, the types of skills that you need for each encounter, it provides you with the tools to do it as well. So
Yeah.
you always understand that if you string together these different techniques that you've gotten, then you can get through anything. And I think for me, like I didn't use a lot of them because there must have been like 15 techniques or something by the end of the game. Um, and one criticism that I have of this game, and I do really love this game, but one criticism is that when you learn a new technique, all that happens is that it flashes up on the screen: push back, push forward, hit X, Y, X, Y, and it's a closable pop up. And no one really loves a pop up in the game, right? You have to stop what you're
Mhm.
doing, you have to read it, and you don't internalize that. It's not like it makes you do the combo, for example, or teach you a new combo by making you do it in the game. It just flashes it up. If you're me, you just close that pretty much straight away, and then you
Yeah.
move on in the game and use the basic things that you've learned, your tried and trusted techniques. And so there are a lot of skills available in this game, but I thought that perhaps it could have been better integrated to actually familiarize the player with using them and to teach you the more advanced techniques rather than just showing you them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and a bunch of games do that. Usually they show you a combo almost to a fault, right? They say now do this exact thing with this
Hmm.
like practice dummy,
Hmm.
but because like you said, it's a pop up, and I also just closed it immediately. Then I'm not using it, so I'm not really sure how it works. And I was lucky to find, like you, a few that I liked, and those few that I liked, I did them the rest of the game,
Hmm.
and that was literally it. Like, but I do like, to the first point, I like that they introduce new abilities as you go. Again,
Hmm.
it's similar to the rest of the game. It's like introducing new things that all seem to fit. Even they have a few puzzles. I'm not a fan of puzzles, which if you listen to the show, you know. But
Yeah, these ones were very gentle. These were like,
very gentle puzzles,
yeah,
yes.
it's
So
like
I
hit
was
hit
fine with
number
it.
one, hit number two, hit number three, and now you're done.
Yeah, and then even later on, again, minor spoiler territory. There's other kind of puzzles, and it's quite different, but it's also very simple. So yeah, I think the combo, the just in general, the combat I liked. I did find two or three things that I liked a lot. One, these are kind of pro tips, is the unblockable attack.
Oh man, that was wonderful.
So
Is that
wonderful.
the? It's like X
X down.
Y.
So X
Yeah, X
down.
down, X
Yep.
X Y,
Yep.
and it's
And it's
like a four
beautiful.
strike combo. That was
Yep.
so satisfying. That just mashed everyone. I loved that one.
Yeah, that one, and also just like the Y forward. Like if you do Y forward instead of
Hmm.
just like Y, like if Y attack was like a kind of a large attack, but over your head and kind of thing. Like
slow, heavy attack.
Slow, heavy attack. But when you just push forward later on, it's just much easier to kind of one-shot enemies.
Is that the stab move?
It's kind of like a stamp forward.
Like a lunge.
Yeah. And it's great because you could do that and follow it up with an X, which is just kind of a quick slash. So if there's a person who has 2 health, 2 hit health essentially, then you can kind of take them out. So I had trouble with some of the spear guys because they have great range.
Yeah, they were a pain. Yeah,
they were a pain. And I'm a really big fan of dodge rolls, and I didn't really love this one. So this is my only mini con. Is that there's a few different areas as well where you have to just block when horses are running by you.
Yeah.
And I thought I could just roll past all of them, and I just kept getting hit with the roll.
It's not really a dodge roll, is it? I think it only allows you to roll through a projectile, not a physical strike.
Yeah, it's not fun. Like that's I think my least favorite thing. And again,
I tried that a few times too, actually. I did, my instinct told me that rolling is going to get me through that spear hit. And I think I must have done it like 5-10 times before I finally cottoned on. It's not a small iframes window. It's just not working.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I was the same way. I was like, I'll just try it again until it does work, but it didn't. And this game loves to, another pro tip, which should be obvious, but this game wants you to block. Like, I'm not a block parry guy. I'm usually just attack. And I played this game, I would say 75% attack. But at times you have to block, especially like you said, when there's a barrage of people, you've got to be blocking so you can basically defend yourself from multiple attacks, get into a better position, and then do your attacking back. But it really wants you to do that. And some of those blocks, though, are beautiful. You mentioned like the cinematography and kind of, these kind of movies. There's some great moments that happen, like slow-mo, when you do a great block and you switch positions and stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, so satisfying. And that's the real samurai moment, isn't it? It's that filmic moment where 3 people come at you and you block all of them and just take them out. And then they all just fall down around you. It's that classic cinematic samurai moment. And I think you're right. I think the game is trying to create those moments for you. And I would say that I probably brute forced it more than it was intended to be brute forced. Like in mob management, I was parrying less than I should. I wasn't using block that much. I was just creating distance between myself and the enemy in order to move in fast and take them out quickly, like roll in a fast or do a run attack, or draw them in and then do those turn attacks to take them out very quickly. But there were a couple of times, I would say maybe like 5 times throughout the game, where you block successfully, you execute a counter, you spin, and the instincts have kicked in at this point, and you take out someone behind you, then you turn, roll, and strike, and they all just drop. And there were a couple of moments where I was just like, fuck, that was it. That was awesome. That was like ballet violence right there. But I think that the game is trying to make you have that balletic, short, intense samurai, like one strike kill experience. But I guess our instincts aren't tuned towards that as gamers, right? It's normally a little bit of spamming your favorite attack and a little bit of kind of... But I think it was semi-successful in doing that. I definitely had moments where I executed samurai attacks that felt the way they were meant to feel in this game,
That's funny you say that. I did. We played the game the same way. It seems like, and I did do brute force more. But again, certain times you just have to, like you said, block to get yourself some space because you're just like swarmed. But there was these, I'll call it accidental moments of beauty where, I was doing what they probably intended. And when I saw that, like almost halfway through the game, these beautiful moments where I block and parry and they're all down, I was like, does the whole game want me to play it like that? Because if they do, I'm not gonna.
Right.
But I see the beauty in it, and we'll come back to that. How about that?
Yeah.
We'll put a pin in that. And that's literally what happened. I think it sounds like for you too. Like there's like 4 or 5 really great moments, maybe 10, where I was doing it, in that style, and it felt great. But I didn't need to, the whole time.
Yeah, and I think that like having moved through this game, which took 5 hours, I did it in 2 sittings, had an absolutely wonderful time with it, loved the story trajectory. I think that the cinematography was just switching up so much that it doesn't let you get bored. It's never like you're just pushing right which can happen in games, to move between combat encounters. It's very active camera, and it makes you feel very engaged in the way that a film does. So it applies that fascination of watching shots change just to keep your attention. And then this very short, sharp combat, moments of exploration, few puzzles, few bosses. I think it's perfect at what it does. And that's pretty high praise. When I think about when I was playing this, it actually occurred to me, I was like, is this like a classic indie game that I'm playing right now? Is this going to be like, the short, sharp experiences of something like a Journey, which is like a 3-hour experience, and it's perfect to what it does, and it doesn't do a lot, but it executes it to perfection. The art style is on point, the music is on point, the direction of the game is on point, and Trek To Yomi does that. I think the only thing that perhaps was in my mind as I was playing the game was this combat is not quite as sharp as it wants to be. It's a little bit what we're talking about. Like it wants you to parry, block, turn, strike, roll. And as we're both saying, I brute forced my way through the game pretty much. My gamer instincts were just like, stay away from that one. It's a heavy enemy, and then go in fast and kill him. And that's how I played it. Mm-hmm. And that perhaps is the only thing that takes this down from being like a 10 to an 8 in my mind, is that there is an element of the game that perhaps does not quite achieve what it wants to do, and that is delivering that samurai combat technique experience that we're talking about not doing for most of the game.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think on the show, I called it a 9 or 10. I think it has to be a 9 because, it does. There's a very few cons, like you said. It feels like an instant classic. Yeah. But if that is a kind of weird mix of like feeling about the combat, then it's not doing everything right. Because if it was, then I would just be playing it brute force, or I'd have to play it their way, and then that'd be like, okay, well, that was the experience. But it kind of mixed the two, and so I think it's kind of a mix. But I still think it's a 9. And also, I'll bring up Inside, a brilliant game, and also something similar where side scrolly. I think the camera changes perspective sometimes, and it does what it does. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I think it was probably around the same amount of time I played that game, and brilliant. And I love the ending. So I like my ending. Although the kind of final piece maybe is that there is multiple endings to this game, right?
Right, and that's something that occurs to me, is that this first playthrough was a little bit about learning the game, a little bit about learning what the combat wants you to do, and you can get through it. And perhaps that is to its credit that you can play through the game in a pretty casual way, as you and I have both done on our first playthrough. But there are difficulty levels. There are 4 difficulty levels. There is one that unlocks only after your first playthrough. And that is the single hit mode. That's like true samurai. 1 hit, you die. 1 hit, they die. And so there is room for... next time I play this game, and I'm pretty sure I am going to play it again, next time I'm just going to put it up 1 difficulty level and see how I cope with it. See if I can perhaps move beyond the basic moveset that got me through that first playthrough. And like, as you say, there are different endings. You can, in a very samurai way, you will occasionally get a choice. You can choose love, duty, or revenge, right? Pretty much. There's 3 strands to the game. And it's pretty much a menu choice that occurs twice in the game. And I'm not sure exactly how much it will... Maybe we should drop a spoiler warning at this point. What do you think? Have I already gone too far?
Because I would love to... Yeah, no, we haven't gone too far. I would love to talk about my choice and see what your choice was, and we can then determine if, it was much different or not.
Yeah, okay. So let's drop a little spoiler warning here. If you are going to bail here because you're yet to play Trek To Yomi, then Carlos, where should listeners go to find you?
Go listen to the So Video Games podcast. And also I'm on TikTok. I do comedy sketches. That's kind of my main thing other than podcasting right now. And it's just my name. So Carlos Rodela, Rodela on TikTok.
Okay. And I'll put links to all of Carlos' stuff in the show notes. And we'll be right back after this. Okay, so we're back for the spoilery part of the game. Yeah, perhaps the final piece of the puzzle that we didn't talk about is that there is some small element of choice in this game. So what did you make of the execution and the implementation of like story choice?
Well, like we alluded to in the main podcast, I don't think it's much, right? I think there's 2 or 3 times where you can make choices, minus the smaller choices you make if you want to see different story bits off the beaten path. So it's not much of a switch, like I'm really interested to see how your game ended because what I did is, like you said, there's like 3 paths I think you can pick. Mm-hmm. And they kind of come up a few different times. I believe it was 3 times.
Maybe it was 3.
Yeah.
There's one right at the end. There's 2 in the game, and then there is a final choice, right?
Oh, right, because it's a final choice. Got it.
Yeah.
Well, I just went the revenge route. I don't know. Maybe it was the movie setting, the anger I had at. Also, something we didn't mention in the main podcast is there's a lot of despair in this game, and total crying everywhere. Everybody's crying.
Right. And we haven't talked about the story because it's pretty much all a spoiler, Right.
It's all just it's a downer, really. If you come to think of it, it's a super downer. A lot of people die. It's a sad game, kind of. And yeah, you're definitely looking for. Is it your sister? I believe, or is it?
At first, I thought it was sister because you first meet her in childhood. You have this female friend who is important to your clan, but then as you come through the game, it seemed to me that perhaps they weren't siblings and that he was a samurai that was sworn to protect her and she was perhaps some kind of nobility of the tribe, and that it felt to me like it went in a romantic direction. Like I couldn't quite tell.
Yeah, I couldn't either.
There's one of the choices, the love route, is like, I don't want her to be alone, I need her, I need to be with her. And that was like a bit strong for sisterly love somehow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, although I just played what was that one game where you protect your sister, and it does actually something very similar where it starts off in your kids. Mm-hmm. Oh my, it's going to bother me what game that was. It's an RPG. I believe it's Chinese. And it made it mainstream to the consoles. I'll have to look it up. But anyways, in that game, you do something very similar. And there is that kind of like, I can't leave her alone, but it was his sister. Mm-hmm. Regardless, she's part of it. Basically, pretty much like people just dying, including, I guess, you. Just everybody dying.
I mean, just to do like a really quick story roundup, I guess, is like, It's a basic samurai story. You start off as an apprentice of a samurai. The samurai is the guardian of a town. There's a woman called Aoki who runs the town or is like a future leader of the town. Your master dies during an attack. You swear to protect the town in his absence, and then it cuts to your adulthood. And as an adult, there is a warlord abroad in the area around the town, and so you decide the best course of action is to go and take out this warlord. So the first chapter of the game is you as an adult samurai leaving the town behind, to use offense as the best form of defense, and like out you go. But it turns out it's a trick. You've been lured away. The town burns to the ground, and everyone is killed, including you. And then the rest of the game is about a journey through the underworld, in which your character has to make choices about what is their primary motivation. Is it love of Aoki? Is it duty to protect the town? Or is it revenge to kill the warlord who has destroyed your life? That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, it is, and it's perfect. You're so eloquent, it's ridiculous. Like, I want to stop podcasting now. That was like the perfect summary of everything, including like, I'm like, and then this happened, and then this happened. You remember when that happened? Anyways, that was awesome. Yes,
thank you,
exactly
Carl.
What you said. I'm going to quit podcasting tomorrow, but
don't do it.
Seriously, that was exactly what happens. And what's really weird is that, you die in the game. And so basically, I don't know if it's 3/4 of the game, but a lot of it, if not half, I guess, is you fighting in this underworld and fighting not just like zombies, which you also fight zombies, but like people who have been wronged just like you. And they think that you're the reason why they're in this kind of Yomi, land of the dead.
Right,
so,
that kind of freaked me out a little bit, actually. When you go into the underworld and then you face the people of your village who you were sworn to protect, and you were their samurai and you were their guardian, but they are all so fucking mad with you,
Yeah,
like for not defending them, that they just come at you. And I
they
can't tell
do.
if it's like, as I was playing this, I was thinking, is this the inside of Hiroki's mind? Like, is it his guilt? Is he fighting his guilt here? Or is this actually shades of the people that died in the village? Like, I literally couldn't tell because they're like disproportionate anger where they want to kill their former guardian, like with all of their strength. It's all they want. It felt more like a guilt trip than like a valid response, if you know what I mean. Although I guess they did die, so they had a point.
They did die. They had a point. Yes. Also, I believe it's like more like a limbo. It feels like kind of a limbo area,
Right,
where
like purgatory.
And we're like in that. Hypothetically, if you were in that kind of scenario, your memories would be blurred, and you wouldn't know
Yeah.
what's really going on. So I'm sure if that is what it is, and it's a real kind of in quotes real space, I would imagine those souls are kind of confused. That's one way of thinking of it. The other way of thinking of it is actually much more concise, which is that he's just in his head the whole time because he got gravely wounded, right? And it was all a dream is the answer, because he wakes up, he gets up and he's like, oh, I'm okay.
But maybe like his soul left his body and he has to run through the kind of the gauntlet of his own fears and his own past and his own demons and specters and the shades of people that he has lost, and he has to go through this journey of self-discovery, I guess. I like that one a little bit less. I like the literal I went through hell story a bit better. It's just like more drama.
It is. And he says that when he comes back to life, he's like, I have already beaten death. So you regular little soldiers don't bother me anymore, which was funny because, again, it led to me feeling as a player empowered.
Yeah.
Right. We went through, I fought like crazy monsters, and we saw there's some really gross, weird monsters in that land of the Yomi. And you come back out and it's like regular town on fire. And you're like, oh yeah, I can just take out all these guys. Like these guys are easy. And I felt like my button combos were faster, and I took out that boss real quick. But to my earlier point, I picked revenge for everything. So I think it was the setting, and the fact that everybody was crying, everybody was burning and dying, and it was such a downer that I was just mad. Like I was mad as the character, and I wasn't going to pick love right now. Are you kidding me? There's no love happening. And so I picked revenge the whole way. And my ending was that I became the thing that I hated.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. So basically I became like the warlord, and I did not want that ending. I thought that revenge was going to be sweet. I guess that's the trick of revenge.
The moral of the story.
Moral of the story is revenge is never right. But it wasn't a great ending because I basically became like a warlord and said, let's go and take out other towns. I was like, really?
Oh, wow.
That's the message?
Crazy. Yeah, I got a completely different ending to you.
Okay.
The first choice, I picked revenge. I felt like the game, like this might just be my interpretation, but I felt like the game was trying to make me lean in a certain direction at different points in the game. So the first choice, like you get a little speech about how this guy has just destroyed your town and he's going to do it again. And so, of course, I picked revenge. Well, he must be stopped. I thought perhaps the right thing is to stop this warlord and to save other villages from befalling the same fate. And then you spend a bit of time following Aoki through Yomi, and you spend a bit of time trying to reach her. And you realize that your character is more attached to her than you thought. You realize that he's like hurting to have lost her. And the game seems to pull you more in that direction. Like you get a little bit of dialogue with her, and then she vanishes in your arms and all of this stuff. So in the second one, I was like, well, everyone's dead. Like, okay, fine. Everyone's dead. Let's just be happy ghosts in love. I picked love. And then for the final one, and after I picked love, the sensei spoke to me and said, I'm very sad because you've betrayed your vow. And I was like, well, shit. I didn't realize I betrayed my vow. My vow was to protect the town as a samurai. But you made me, my vow to you on your deathbed was to protect Aoki. Like, that's what you said to her. You said, look after her for me. And so I thought I was fulfilling my vow. And then I was like, oh shit, I've disappointed my sensei. That sucks. And then by the final one, I got to the final one and I was like, okay, well, I've tried the revenge. I've tried the love. I think that perhaps what my sensei was trying to tell me is that I need to stick to my vow, and that's my purpose in life. And so for the final choice, I picked duty. So I picked all three of them at different times.
Mm.
And the ending that I got was that Aoki vanished and was put to peace. And I got to let go of her. And then I went back to the town. I faced down the final boss, the warlord, whose nose you've cut off, and the creepy guy who's made all of this happen. And at the end of the game, it was like I'd fulfilled my vow, and we started to rebuild.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's funny because I feel like you're right. They did kind of push you in those directions, and you picked probably all of them the way that they maybe wanted you to.
Right, I was following the cues. I felt like it was trying to push me onto the right path, maybe.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't want that path. I'm onto your tricks.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's fine though. You were single-minded. You went for it.
I did go for it, but again, I'm not super happy with it. But you mentioned another playthrough. I infamously don't like difficult games for difficult sake. I did play a lot of Elden Ring because that's a longer story. But in general, I'm not that big of a fan of like harder modes. And also, when I play a narrative game of any type, I actually like my first playthrough being canon. So even though I don't like my ending, I think I'm going to stick with it.
I mean, it sounds like a pretty samurai movie kind of ending, It
really is.
They really are moral stories, and they really are, I guess that's why it's the subject material of this game, which is like such a loving tribute to that form of cinema, because they're moral stories, and they are about inner demons, and they are about loss, they're about betrayal, they're about duty, they're about what do you choose, and what do things become? What does your life become? What effects does that have? It's like a super moral, like a simple morality around these films. And I guess, the moral is right. I mean, I'm very curious to know what happens if you choose love now, because that's the ending that neither of us got. So there is a third ending for that. And I'm kind of impressed that they are substantially different. I wasn't sure as I was playing through. So it's interesting to hear that yours was substantially different.
Yeah, I thought at some point I'd just be like, I'm going to turn around and say, we've done it and everything's fine. But all of a sudden I turn around and I have the armor. Essentially was wearing the armor that he was wearing. Yeah.
Shit.
And so I looked like him. I still had my nose. But I look like him. And also, this is great because we're full spoiler. At the very last scene, maybe this game's at 10. I got it. Fuck it. At the very last scene of me being evil, and again, me as a player being tricked, I didn't know that was happening. And I really was taken aback. It like slow zooms in on your face of the main character, and he's got the helmet on, and he said something terrible, like, we're going to go take out other lands, And wow. I'm feeling terrible. It slow zooms on his face, and a small smile appears.
Oh, shit.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, that was the best smile in the game, because it's like almost like the developers were like, see what you did?
Yeah. Right,
brilliant,
because that's the journey of the villain, is that he has been through hell already, and that's why he's like the most powerful warlord, right? He's been on this journey, and his choice was darkness.
Oh my goodness, I'm Darth Vader. Okay, so this game's at 10. I'm switching it. I'm switching it from 9, because even the small dodge rolls and the combat, I mean, come on. I think overall, with an experience and how long we've talked about it, I think I'm going to put it like a 9.5, 10. It's incredible.
Yeah, I've got absolutely no doubt that this will feature on my Games of the Year list. I mean, it made me start my Games of the Year list. It's May now. And like, there's always some point in the year when some game comes along, and I'm like, oh shit, I better note this one down for GOTY time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I opened up a little note on my phone and just tapped in like Trek To Yomi. It was first on the list this year.
Wow.
I guess Elden Ring will be on there. I guess Forbidden West will be on there. That's maybe something for you and I to talk about another time. But GOTY 2022. Yeah, I've also got Norco on there. I'm not sure if you've played that one yet.
I saw you mention it, and I have to go download it. I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, that's on the list as well. So I've got 4 games on my GOTY long list, which usually ends up being like 20, 25 games, and then I trim it down to 10 and have a top 5. But Trek To Yomi, I will be amazed. I would put money on it being in that top 10 and maybe even that top 5. It's yeah, I mean, if you're playing through a game and as you're playing it, you're literally thinking like, I might be playing a new classic game here. And I did that with this game. And there is only, as you said, there is only a couple small flaws, but it really feels like picking at it. I think maybe I'll do another playthrough this year and just put the difficulty up a notch, see if I can tune into the combat more. make different choices, and then like I'll get more of a feel for where I land on it critically in the end. But I think you're right. It's a very good game. It really really blew my mind. I was really taken with it. Very impressed. Love the length and love all of the contact. They just did a great job with it.
And similar to you, I was while I was playing it, and that was actually the first thing I said in my preview was like, I think this is something special.
Mm-hmm.
Like, 'cause especially when I switched right, I thought it was just going to be all left to right combat, really, because through the trailers and stuff, that's all I got, the feel I got. And the minute I put my sword away and I walked around, it just felt different. And then the camera angle started changing, and I was like, "Whoa!" And depth of field, and I was like, "This is something else."
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's got this sweep to it, hasn't it? It's got this this like crazy momentum and sweep to it. That's just, it's like you're playing like a really well directed, high production value movie at some point. Like as you come out of the village and it cuts to you running across the fields, and then it cuts to you coming through the forest. It's just special. It's like very cool experience.
Yeah, I want more games like this.
Absolutely. What have you got on your radar for the future? I mean, I noticed that it was a very strong week for Game Pass. I saw that Citizen Sleeper came out. It's a game I've been waiting for because it's by the guy who did, by the person rather, who did In Other Waters a couple of years ago, like that underwater text adventure. And Citizen Sleeper is the follow-up game. So I've been really excited to play that one. But I wanted to finish Norco first because they're like similarly text-heavy, story-led sci-fi games.
The art looks amazing of Citizen Sleeper. I really like the art. I don't think I've played either of those games, his previous one either.
In Other Waters was pretty great. There's a podcast about it way back in the Gaming in the Wild backlog, and it's one of the 3 games that I loved so much that I interviewed the developer of that one, Gareth Damian Martin, came on the podcast, and we talked through like the inspiration for it because it's such an odd game. It's like a topographical map-based text adventure where you're like navigating around a map, looking at like topography, like contours of where things get deeper and taller underwater mountains. And as you're moving between dots on the map, you see a text window that says like you're entering a forest of seaweed. The seaweed is purple. There are things swimming around between the reeds and this kind of thing. So it's like you're getting a text adventure and an exploration, a map-based exploration game. It's just super unusual. So I'm super excited to see what Citizen Sleeper is. This just seems like a really talented game designer.
Oh, well, so interesting you bring it up because one, I'm going to get it on Game Pass as soon as it's available. If it's maybe now, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's out now.
And then also I was looking at Steam today, and right now they're having this, I don't know when this podcast is going up, but currently there's what's it called? Ludo Narracon?
Yeah,
which is a festival for narrative games.
Yes.
And by the way, I've been noticing Steam doing a lot of that now. I mean, Brad wouldn't know because he never goes on his PC. But yeah, there's like a lot of these like really quick flash sales or flash like events that Steam does. I feel like they're doing more and more of them. And this one's just all based on narrative games. And so there's demos, there's sales, and they'll even do like streaming panels and stuff. So I really, really like what they're doing with that. And for me, I can be a sucker for a really good narrative text adventure. So I'm all over this.
Yeah, In Other Waters is a strange one. If you do try it In Other Waters, it's got a bit of a clunky UI. It's like you have to choose your direction with one stick and then press a button to select that you want to move and then hit another button. And some people have just noped out on it super fast because they didn't like how they had to play the game. Like they just didn't like the UI straight up. But for me, it was like, whilst it was slightly clunky, I just got into the rhythm really quickly and I felt like I was operating a machine, which is how you're supposed to feel in this game. It's not like Subnautica where it's all 3D and zippy and you're kind of in a little submarine where you can swim really fluidly. It's not like that. It's like you're operating a machine that is making this ship move between dots, So it kind of clicked with the themes of the game for me. But yeah, super excited to play Citizen Sleeper for sure. But, since we were speaking about games of the year a little bit, like what else have you got coming up there's always surprises that just come out of nowhere and like land on our lists, but are there any big releases that you're full of anticipation for in the rest of the year?
My main one is Starfield. And I know that I'm hoping it's November, but I really feel like it'll slip
Mm-hmm.
date wise. But like for me, yeah, I want a huge open world to lose myself in again. Far Cry 6 was one of my favorite experiences for that, and I want the return of Bethesda, like a lot of people do,
Mm-hmm.
in a true open world game, sci-fi RPG. It's hard to come by. I love them, Mass Effects of the world. So that's my biggest one. There's a few small ones on the way. I'll probably lose myself in what's that ridiculous GTA game, Saints Row.
Mm-hmm.
It looks kind of like Fortnite this time around, but it'll still be a fun time. But yeah, I have to get back to you on the indie games because I have a list somewhere. I don't have it in front of me, but there's a bunch
Mm-hmm.
of little indies that I'm waiting for. But nothing that like is I'm really really excited about.
Yeah, I mean, my list at the start of the year. I think was a lot of them are out by now. There was like Tunic, which I bounced on a little bit because it was I don't know. I was playing it alongside Elden Ring, and it turned out to be like cute Souls rather than Zelda.
Yes,
And I was
yeah,
like, that's not what I want right now. And then there was Weird West, which I was really looking
yep,
forward to, and have played some of, but not quite fallen in love with in the way that I had hoped. And then there was Far Changing Tides, another game that I was really looking forward to. And I guess Citizen Sleeper is like the next one, and that's out this week. So other than that, I don't know much about Starfield actually. I've only seen the kind of the teasers that we've had so far. But like you, I love a big space game.
yeah. And we don't get many sci-fi or sci-fi RPGs.
Hmm.
So I mean, I think it's just going to be incredible. I'm just afraid that it's going to get to 2023 and they're going to bump it, but.
Yeah.
And the other one, by the way, is kind of an indie game. And this is a real quick side story. So I like cats in games. Who doesn't like cats? I guess
Oh,
some people don't.
Stray, isn't it? It's going to be Stray.
Yeah, yeah. Because I just played, if you listen to the last episode, I played this indie cat game that really
Uh-huh.
made me angry because it starts with your mom cat dying and it's super sad. And then you have to run around, and then you have a food meter and all these meters. And I just was confused by the
Oh
gameplay. And
God.
all of a sudden, my little kitten, who already watched his mom die, was walking the streets. I ran out of food, and I died.
Oh my God. A kitten
And
apocalypse. No one wants that.
yes, and then here's the worst part, and I'm going to say it on this podcast because I'm going to bring the dread to this podcast. But the worst part is in the credits after you died. Your little cat is walking on a rainbow bridge, and it goes, "I'll see you soon, Mom."
Oh God.
No.
This is the same as in Ni no Kuni. Actually, it's like how you're kind of trying to save your mom's spirit.
Oh, that's
And
right. You
every
are.
time you die, your character says, "I'm so sorry, Mom." And you're
So
like, Jesus
sorry,
Christ,
Mom.
man, that's a bit much.
Yeah. So while that one failed me, Stray, I have a good feeling. I mean, it's a cyberpunk world. I like that. The
Yeah.
graphics look amazing. It's kind of a small mid-tier team. I'm rooting for them. And you play as a cat. There's actually some shooting elements of it. So
Noticed that. Yeah, that was unexpected.
yeah, minor spoilers that you can meet a robot at some point, and that robot, which I always like a fun robot companion, will help you with some like combat moves as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's another indie I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, same here. All right. I guess the final one for me is God of War if it comes out, but do we know yet?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's the only other big kind of Sony spectacular that is on the radar at this point, but if we haven't had a release date so far, it's probably not this year, is it? We're already halfway through the year.
I don't think it is. And also, I'm not. I really enjoyed the last game, but I'm not like I wouldn't mind playing it next year. Weirdly enough, myself.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not like itching for that gameplay right now.
Yeah.
Like Hellblade, by the way, is that this year too?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Is it Senua's Sacrifice the first one or this? I forget what they're called.
This one Senua's something else. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously you probably saw the trailer or the gameplay, not trailer,
Yeah.
gameplay, and it looked incredible.
Yeah.
And I like what similarly like to not very similarly, but in JRPGs and some other games, you can get this kind of undercurrent of a different message about humanity or about
Mhm.
how people experience the world. And that's what that first game did so well and just kind of showed, tried to show at least what trauma was like for people as well and
Mhm.
people with disabilities and stuff. And so, yeah, I love the mixture of that. So I'm excited for that. I don't know if it's this year.
I think it is supposed to be because we've seen quite a lot of that one by now, haven't we? And it was looking pretty slick already.
It looked finished. So
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if Starfield slips over that that year line, and God of War comes later. But if Stray and Hellblade come out this year, that's a couple to look forward to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, Carlos. It's been really fun to talk to you. We finally did it.
We did it. Yeah, it's been really fun. And I'll come on anytime, especially because I have to take pointers about this eloquent verbiage you have. Because, again, if you listen to my podcast, please go listen. But at the same time, you'll hear me just say a lot of ums and ahs. And I've been doing this for years, so that's not going to change. But if I want,
I don't know. Don't undersell video games. It's a great listen. Everyone should go and check out.
It's a great list. Thank you so much. But you are concise, and I like your words.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Carlos, and I appreciate you making the time to come on. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
So thanks again to Carlos for coming on the show. I hope you enjoyed this Trek To Yomi review episode. I'll put links in the show notes for So Video Games and to go and follow Carlos on Twitter. I recommend that you do. I'll be back next week with a new episode. I'm not sure what it will be about yet. I'm currently playing Norco. I plan to play Citizen Sleeper, so perhaps one of those. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so in a few ways. You can leave a rating on Spotify. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and you can even support the show at Patreon, at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. Thanks very much if that's something that interests you. You can also find me on social media as Gaming in the Wild, on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube and Twitch, and even on Facebook. That's all from me. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now.